The Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, or the Four Regions Together, was the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. It spanned thousands of miles and encompassed over 10 million people at its height. Built on military conquest, centralized administration, and a sophisticated agricultural system, it rose quickly and fell just as fast. The roots of the empire stretch back to the 12th century. According to Inca legend, the sun god Inti sent his children, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, to bring order to the world. They emerged from Lake Titicaca and eventually founded the city of Cusco, which would become the capital of the empire. These stories were passed down orally, since the Inca had no written language. While the legend adds a mythical sheen to the history, archaeological evidence suggests that early Inca societies began consolidating power and establishing regional influence centuries before their dramatic rise to empire. For centuries, Cusco remained a modest kingdom among many Andean civilizations. The region was home to a mosaic of cultures, like the Wari, the Moche, and the Chimu, all of which contributed knowledge and practices to the Incas' eventual success. But everything changed in 1438 when the Chanca people attacked. The ruling emperor, Viracocha Inca, fled. His son, Pachacuti, stayed behind. He led the defense of Cusco, defeated the Chanca, and claimed the throne for himself. Pachacuti was more than a military leader. He was a strategist, architect, and reformer. He reorganized the kingdom's political structure, establishing a central bureaucracy that divided the empire into 4 administrative quarters. He launched ambitious infrastructure projects, including temples, administrative centers, fortresses, and roadways. Most notably, he began the construction of Machu Picchu, the famed mountaintop estate believed to be a royal retreat or possibly a religious sanctuary. Pachacuti's reign marked the beginning of a rapid expansion. His son, Tupac Inca Yupanqui, took power around 1471 and continued the military campaigns. He pushed the empire's borders into modern-day Ecuador and Chile, conquering rivals and absorbing new territories. Each newly conquered area was integrated into the empire through a combination of diplomacy, force, and resettlement policies known as mitma, where populations were relocated to break up local loyalties and encourage assimilation. The Inca administration was highly organized. Society was based on a rigid hierarchy, with the Sapa Inca, literally the only Inca, at the top. He was considered a living god, the son of Inti. Below him were nobles, provincial governors called curacas, and local leaders who ensured imperial policies were followed. The empire was divided into suyu regions and further subdivided into smaller units, each responsible for census data, taxation, and public works. The empire relied heavily on the Emita system, a form of mandatory public service. Every able-bodied citizen was required to contribute labor to the state. This labor built roads, farmed imperial lands, mined precious metals, and served in the military. In return, the state provided food, clothing, and security. This reciprocal relationship created a stable society where basic needs were met and loyalty to the empire was rewarded. One of the most impressive features of the Inca Empire was its infrastructure. The Capac Ñan, or Royal Road, was a 25,000-mile network connecting the entire empire. These roads traversed mountains, valleys, and deserts, linking urban centers, military outposts, and sacred sites. Along them were tambos, or way stations, where travelers and soldiers could rest and resupply. To communicate across this vast network, the Inca used chasqui, relay runners who carried messages. Since they had no written language, they used quipus, knotted strings that recorded information through color, type of knot, and placement. These served as data for taxes, censuses, military logistics, and possibly even storytelling. Quipucamayaks, or knot readers, were trained specialists who could interpret this complex code. Agriculture thrived in the Andean environment due to terrace farming, irrigation, and climate-adapted crops. The Inca cultivated potatoes, maize, quinoa, peanuts, and coca. They developed freeze-drying techniques such as chuño to preserve food for storage and transportation. Agricultural surplus was stored in state granaries, ensuring food security even in times of drought or conflict. Religion played a central role. The Inca worshipped Inti, the sun god, above all. Temples such as Coricancha in Cusco were richly decorated in gold and served as focal points for religious ceremonies. Sacrifices, sometimes human, were conducted to appease the gods and ensure good harvests. The Inca calendar was deeply intertwined with astronomical observations, and festivals marked solstices, equinoxes, and other celestial events. By the time Huayna Capac took the throne around 1493, the empire was at its zenith. Under his leadership, Tawantinsuyu stretched from present-day Colombia to central Chile. The administrative system functioned efficiently, and the empire's economy was strong. But it was during Huayna Capac's reign that cracks began to appear. Expanding an empire of such size meant managing diverse cultures, constant military campaigns, and rising internal tensions. In the early 1520s, a wave of disease swept through the empire, most likely smallpox, introduced by Europeans who had arrived in the Americas. Huayna Capac and his chosen heir died suddenly, throwing the empire into chaos. A power struggle ensued between two of his sons, Atahualpa and Huáscar. Huáscar, the legitimate heir, controlled Cusco. Atahualpa ruled the northern part of the empire from Quito. What followed was a brutal civil war. Atahualpa eventually emerged victorious, but the conflict left the empire deeply divided and militarily exhausted. Cities were sacked, nobles were executed, and trust among regional governors was shattered. In 1532, at the worst possible moment, the Spanish arrived. Francisco Pizarro led a small force of about 168 men into Inca territory. Despite their numbers, they carried advanced weaponry, guns, steel swords, horses, and a ruthless determination to conquer. The Spanish arrived in Cajamarca, where Atahualpa was camped with thousands of his soldiers. Pizarro invited Atahualpa to a meeting, which turned out to be a trap. The Spaniards ambushed the Inca, killing thousands in a single afternoon and capturing the emperor. Atahualpa, realizing the value the Spaniards placed on gold, offered to fill a room with treasure in exchange for his release. The ransom was paid, but the Spanish had other plans. They feared that releasing Atahualpa would incite resistance. In 1533, they executed him by strangulation. With their leader gone, the Inca were thrown into disarray. The Spanish marched into Cusco and installed a puppet ruler, Manco Inca Yupanqui. Initially cooperative, Manco soon rebelled and led a massive uprising. Though he failed to retake Cusco, he fled to the mountains and established the Neo-Inca state in Vilcabamba. The resistance lasted for decades. The Inca launched guerrilla-style attacks and maintained a measure of independence in Vilcabamba until 1572. That year, the Spanish captured and executed the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru. With his death, the empire was officially dissolved. The Spanish imposed their language, religion, and administrative systems. Temples were destroyed or converted into churches. Inca nobles were killed, assimilated, or stripped of their status. But the Spanish, while militarily dominant, could never fully erase Inca influence. Indigenous resistance continued in various forms for centuries. Yet, the story does not end there. The Inca legacy survives in many ways. Modern Quechua-speaking communities still inhabit the Andes. Their agricultural methods, textiles, and spiritual practices echo Inca traditions. Traditional festivals still celebrate Inca gods and historical events, often blending with Catholic rituals. Sites like Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, and Sacsayhuaman stand as engineering marvels. The terraces still function. The stones, carved without mortar, still fit together with uncanny precision. These remnants are not only archaeological treasures, but also symbols of resilience. The Inca Empire lasted less than a century in its full form, from Pachacuti's rise in 1438 to Tupac Amaru's death in 1572. In that short time, they built one of the most sophisticated and expansive civilizations in the ancient world. Today, the Inca spirit lives on in the people of the Andes. It lives in the stepped terraces still used for farming, in the woven textiles passed down through generations, and in the silent ruins that whisper of a once great empire. The spirit of Tawantinsuyu survives not only in stone, but in memory, language, and daily life. The rise was meteoric. The fall was catastrophic. But the memory? Indelible. If you found this journey into history fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. There are more empires to explore, more truths to uncover, and more voices from the past waiting to be heard.